My name is Julie George. I'm the audit manager on the engagement for the Walker County Board of Commissioners. My colleague, audit partner Clay Pilgrim, is here as well. And as she said, we're here today to present the annual financial report for the fiscal year ended September 30, 2024. That was due to the state by the end of March, and everything was timely completed and filed. And I wanted to just take a moment to let you know what we are providing you today. You've got a bound annual financial report. This is a full set of financial statements for all the county's funds and activities, including notes as well as our reports. And then we have also issued 2 letters. One letter, you'll notice it has significant audit matters on the first page. That is a letter summarizing certain communications that we are required to make to you as the Walker County Board of Commissioners. So just wanted to point that letter out. And then we've got a second letter. You'll notice that it has numbered bullet points at the bottom of it. And those are what we call management points or recommendations for things that different departments or constitutional offices or the county would want to look into implemented. And we have discussed those with finance, with the appropriate constitutional offices. And I also want to say thank you to finance. Thank you to Greg and Angela and their team. And thank you to everyone that we work with at Walker County. We certainly couldn't do what we do without their assistance. And because you are a county, we work with a lot of different people here. We visit each of your constitutional offices. We visit multiple departments. And we, like I said, they're always attentive to our needs, to our questions, and we appreciate that very much. The last item that you have is a bound color presentation. And this is where we're going to spend our time this evening. Now, I'm more than happy to talk about anything that you would like to, but this is a much more condensed version than that large bound report you have in front of you. So it will touch on some highlights of the financial statements for the year ended September 30, 2024. So that first slide covers the audit opinion. That audit opinion is on pages 1 through 3 of that bound financial report. It's very comparable to what you've seen in the past, but I did want to mention that we issued what we call an unmodified opinion on the county's financial statements. That means that in our opinion, based on our audit, we believe those financial statements do present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the county as of September 30, 2024, and the respective changes in financial position and cash flows where applicable for that fiscal year then ended. A couple other things mentioned in that audit opinion. We perform our audit in accordance with both auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America and also government auditing standards, which are issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. That letter's 3 pages long, but just to highlight a couple other key points within that letter, the financial statements are the responsibility of Walker County's management. As your independent auditors, it's our responsibility to express our opinion on those financial statements. And you may also hear that called a clean opinion. When I say unmodified, that means that we did not have to modify our report. So that allows you as the board to take that report and this bound financial statement and understand that you can place reliance on those financial statements based on our audit. The next slide is about I skipped a slide, I apologize. The government-wide statements is the slide that we'll be looking at next. One thing I wanted to point out with the government-wide statements, those start on page 15. These are different from what you are accustomed to seeing on a month-to-month basis. You only see these statements annually in this annual financial report. And I wanted to point out what those are and how that's different from what you usually see. If you look at page 15 and 16 of that bound report, and you're welcome to jot those page numbers down if you would rather not actually open that up. But there is a statement of net position, and that lists the county's assets, liabilities, and net position as of 9/30/2024. And this includes the county as a whole. It includes a column for the governmental activities and the business type activities. So that is going to be your governmental activities, going to be your SPLOST, your general fund, your T-SPLOST funds, all combined. And then your business type activities would be your landfill and the Mountain Cove Farms combined. And typically when you're looking at financials on a month-to-month basis, you're probably seeing each fund separate. So that's why I wanted to point out that you only see this presentation as a whole on an annual basis. So this would present all of the county's assets and liabilities and show the residual net position. On page 17, this is also presenting the county as a whole. This presents the results of operations for the county. So here you'll see the county's revenues and expenses for the year. And again, this is the county as a whole on the full accrual basis of accounting. So it's going to be more information combined than what you usually look at month to month. The next slide will touch on the government-wide net position. I do want to point out the last 3 fiscal years, there was an excess of revenues over expenditures. So that allowed the county to increase its net position each year of the last 3 years. And the county ended, and you'll see this on page 17 of the bound report, ended 9/30/24 with a total net position of right under $174 million. And as you'll see on that slide, I mean, that's up from 2022's amount of 141. And the county's been able to do that by its revenues exceeding its expenditures over the last few years. You'll notice that the net position is broken down into different components on this slide. I wanted to touch base just a moment to let you know what those are. You've got the net investment in capital assets. That is the net amount that Walker has spent on equipment, infrastructure, buildings, basically all your capital assets, vehicles, equipment, net of the accumulated depreciation to date, and net of any debt that is due on those assets. And you'll see, again, that number has increased over the past few years. So it's obvious that Walker has invested, the net amount has increased $20 million since 2022. So you can see there your investment in the county's capital assets. And then you have that restricted net position. That is going to consist of any funds that are restricted for purpose. That would include your SPLOST, your T-SPLOST, your development authority is included there because they're restricted for economic development, your ARPA money, your fire and rescue money, any settlement funds from opioid. There's multiple separate funds outside of the general fund that make up that restricted net position. And then you've got your unrestricted net position. And you'll also see that it's also up from 2 years ago, from 2022 to 2024, up from 31 to 41 million. And that is not restricted as to purpose. So that would be the net position that is available without restriction. See, the next slide addresses the general fund. This is probably the fund you pay most attention to because that's your operating fund for the county. And this is probably the financial statements that you are looking at along with your budget on a month-to-month basis. So definitely wanted to spend some time on the general fund. That starts on page 18 in that bound report. And we do present a general fund balance sheet, which includes the assets and liabilities and fund balance of the general fund. And then also starting on page 21, the county is presenting the revenues and expenditures of the general fund. I'll have just a few comments on the slide here, basically explaining any significant variances over the prior year. And you'll notice that revenues were a decrease of about $675,000. Local option sales tax, insurance premium tax, and other income were up. You'll notice that property taxes were down. I wanted to point out that that is primarily due to the timing of receipt. So the general fund has what GASB calls a 60-day availability period. So that means you're only recognizing taxes in the general fund that either come in during the year or come in within 60 days after year end. And that amount that comes in within 60 days after year end just happened to be higher at 9/30/24 than it was at 9/30/23. So that is primarily the difference in that property tax decrease. If you were to go back and look at the statement of activities, which doesn't have an availability period required, you'll see that those taxes are more comparable from 23 to 24. Expenditures were up about 4%. I've got a few notes on here about some of the larger increases. District attorney, there were some supplements added to the ADAs. Jail operations, there were some additional employees. And then highways and streets, there were also some additional employees. So that's why you see those increases there. And general government buildings and plant were down just due to repairs and maintenance being down over the prior year. On the next slide, we've got some of the totals of revenues and expenditures over the last 3 fiscal years. So I wanted to take a look at that with you. And again, the FY24, you'll see those changes are relative to the changes that we discussed on the previous slide. But this does show, if you look at the revenues, which is, sorry, I've got 2 here and I can't remember what color that is. It's the blue line. So if you look at the blue line, that's the county's revenues over the last few years. And if you look at the green line represents the county's expenditures over the last 3 years. Okay, the next slide, we have put together a slide about the landfill. And again, it's a comparative for the last 3 fiscal years as well. The blue line are the revenues over the last 3 years. And the operating expenses are the yellow line over the last 3 years. And the detail for those numbers for FY24 are on page 30. Okay, and then I wanted to touch base just very briefly on your SPLOST and T-SPLOST schedules. Those are on pages 107 to 110. And then we have summarized a couple of things on each one. So we've got your SPLOST 2013 and 2020 referendum, and you spent about $1 million out of the 2013, about $8.2 million out of the 2020, and of course the 2020 is still paying over, because that's the current referendum where sales tax is being collected, it's still paying over money to the cities, and that was about $3 million. The SPLOST 2013 money, of course, has already been collected, but there is still funds there that Walker County is spending. Similar to the SPLOST, we've got a 2017 and 2023 T-SPLOST issue. Again, that 2017 has been collected, but there are still funds left, and some of those were expended during the year, about $187,000. And then the 2023, which is the current T-SPLOST that's being collected, about $4.4 million expended. And there is a detail as required by the state, as I said, on pages 107 through 110, where you can actually see the amount spent on each SPLOST and T-SPLOST project. Okay, moving along to the next slide. I wanted to mention there's a couple other reports in here. We talked about the report on the financial statements, we also, because we perform the audit in accordance with government auditing standards, we also have an additional report starting on page 96, and that is where we have considered the county's internal controls and compliance as part of planning our audit. We don't actually provide a compliance or an opinion on that testing, but we do, of course, bring to your attention anything that comes to our attention that we think is significant. And the county did not have any material weaknesses in financial reporting come to our attention. We did note 2 significant deficiencies, and those are included. Let me give you a page number for those. Those are on pages 105. So that report on page 96, 97 references those. Those are on page 105. And then we've got one other report within this large bound report, and this is relative to the county's federal awards. So because Walker County received and expended over $750,000 in federal awards during the year ended 9/30/24, we are also required to perform what we call a single audit, or an audit in accordance with the uniform guidance. And that report is on page 98. We did not note any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies when we looked at your internal controls and compliance on federal awards. Got a couple slides following that, just discussing changes with GASB this year and also what will be coming up next year. So that first change is GASB 100, and it's called Accounting Changes and Error Corrections. We do have a footnote included in the annual financial report that the county did implement that for 9/30/2024. I do want to point out that the county did not have any error corrections, but we did have to implement that report so that the county, if it did have some, would be reporting in accordance with the current GASB. And then coming up next, on that next slide, we've got GASB 101 coming up. And that standard is going to be on compensated absences. So that standard is going to change the way that governments and Walker County report compensated absences. So that would include your sick time, that would include your vacation time, any paid time off will be considered under this new standard. And we will be working with finance ahead of time and HR. We've actually already included them in a webinar recently that we're doing to assist our clients with the implementation of that GASB 101 that's coming up. Okay, the next slide is our contact information. I know that's a lot of information that you've just been given tonight, and very condensed presentation considering how much content is included, but I would encourage you to reach out to myself or Clay as you look this over. If you have any questions, we're available whether we're here or not. At any time, please reach out. And I'm happy to spend additional time on anything that you would like or answer any questions at this time if you have any.
Does the board have any questions for Ms. Julie?
So I asked Clay this last year and he wouldn't answer me. So
is that why he put me up here tonight?
That's probably why. Yeah, it is.
That's right.
So you guys do a lot of counties.
We do a lot of counties.
I asked them to give me a grade on a scale of 1 to 10, but they can't do that. But are we good, better, best? I mean, how did all that look just in layman's terms? Is it good condition?
You didn't calculate general fund balance, did you? You did not. One thing that we do to measure, let me see if I can take a look at that. One thing that we do to measure, I would say, the health of government sometimes is look at how much fund balance they have at the end of their fiscal year. Now, one thing to keep in mind, when looking at Walker County is you're a 9/30 fiscal year end, So you do have, that's right, that's probably your healthiest time of year from the standpoint of you've just billed or are about to bill property taxes. So I was just gonna take a look and see.
It's good, it's healthy.
Good, good.
I
You looking at it?
can run the number for you real quick.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to share that because that's usually something that boards and finance directors are interested in. Like I said, I knew that it was healthy because we do assess that, but I didn't have the number in front of me.
About 86%, 10 months.
Okay, so what he just calculated was looking at your fund balance. You've got enough unrestricted money in the general fund that you could operate for about 10 months without revenues coming in. So that's a very healthy place to be. You know, I always think anywhere around 6 months is probably healthy, but that is very dependent upon other things, like how much debt do you have? You know, what are your plans for the future? Like Chairwoman Teams mentioned, trying to get a handle on what does it take to run the county. So, you know, you may see that go up. It's just something you'd want to keep an eye on. And what kind of capital projects do you have? You know, what are you really just need to know what are your plans for that fund balance if it continues to go up. But it's healthy, but not too much. That's another question we get sometimes. So I just think that's a good measurement point. And also the general fund does have some other funds, of course, that it has to help out. You know, as you know, there are some transfers to other funds that maybe can't make it without the general fund help. So that's something else you'd want to keep in mind when you're assessing, you know, how much fund balance do you need.
Yeah, I'll mention too real quick, so, when you look at that graph, so that chart that's got those expenditures and other financing uses and all, it looks like a huge increase in the expenditures. A large part of that is a transfer out, like she's mentioning, and that's due to the defeasance of the debt. There was one final bond that was paid off in the year, so that transfer out to defease those bonds is there as well. So that makes that expenditure number look like it's shooting way up, but it's actually a good thing. It's not when you're defeasing some bonds there. Or defease is a term there for you're paying it off in advance of when you can, so it has to be set aside in the escrow account and paid off over time. So.
And that's another very positive point. I mean, you've got 10 months left after you paid off how much debt?
I think it's $10 million.
About $10 million worth of debt in 9/30/2024. So.
Well, around 10 months. We have till September, right?
Well, she was saying that 10 months of fund balance. Did we
I
calculate
got
a minute ago?
you.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that was as of September 30, 2024. So if revenues, I always just say if revenues stopped coming in on 10/1 and your expenditures remained consistent, the county could operate for 10 months off the money that it has.
Right, that's good to know. Did you have a question, Mr. Wilson?
I'm just making sure I understood what he said. So where these graphs where it shows more expenditures than money coming in, that was because you.
It's largely
paid out.
$10 million of that, and that's a
I saw
rounded
that in a
number,
couple
but
places, but that's probably.
that's a large reason for that increase in that cross.
So my question is that as we look at how to invest this money, so it just doesn't sit there and do nothing for us, are you guys available for questions on what is a legal investment and things like that?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay,
Appreciate
thank
that.
you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you
your
all.
hard work.
Anything
We
at all
really
interim,
appreciate you guys have
reach
done a
out.
great job.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for the thorough report.